Hey, well, welcome to week 3 of our summer series of You and I Together. My name is Cassie. I am in the summer intern in Owyhee County for University of Idaho Extension. And today we're going to talk about the science behind growing flowers. Before we do that, though, I want to talk a little bit about what University of Idaho Extension does. So Extension brings the knowledge and research of the university to you, where you live, and when it's convenient for you. There's a lot of different issues that Extension works on, such as food production systems, 4-H youth development, horticulture and small farms, and a lot of other things. So if you're not connected to your local Extension office, I highly recommend getting connected because there's a lot of great opportunities there. Today, we're going to watch a video on the health and wellness.
University of Idaho Extension is keeping Idaho's citizens and communities healthy by helping people of all ages improve their health and build important life skills. From nutrition education, diabetes management, and food safety to family finance education, UI Extension is helping build healthy and thriving Idahoans. All right, well, like I mentioned, a few technical difficulties. There we go. My name is Cassie. I am the University of Idaho Extension intern in Owyhee County. My internship focuses on family consumer sciences and agriculture. I am a student at the University of Idaho, and I'm studying agricultural education with the goal of being an ag teacher. And this is my second summer with UI Extension. I've gotten the opportunity to do a lot of great things through this program, and a few of those are data collection on some different research projects. In the bottom left, that was a fine fuels research project we were working on, and we were collecting biomass. I also worked on one at Rinker Rock Creek Ranch. I got the opportunity to do some teaching, and then in the middle there, you'll see Scott and I. Scott is our chat helper today, working on another You and I Together series from last summer called Water Safety. So I've had a lot of great opportunities through working with Extension, and like I mentioned, definitely get connected with your local Extension office. But today we're going to talk all about plants, and I want to start out with a little bit about why plants are important. And plants provide us with a lot. Some of those things are food, shelter, medicine, fuel, fibers, and fun, because gardening can be a great activity as a stress reliever or maybe just a hobby during the summer that is really great. So going a little bit further into the different classifications of plants, we have both gymnosperms and angiosperms. So we'll start with our gymnosperms. Those are our plants that do not produce flowers or fruits. Their seed is exposed rather than being enclosed in a protective seed coat. And they tend to be the plants such as grasses and pine trees. So in the picture, you can see there's a pine tree there. You're not going to see any flowers on a pine tree. So that's kind of what makes it a gymnosperm. And it has those pine cones, which is the seed. And that's what it uses to grow new trees. And then next we have angiosperms, and angiosperms are kind of going to be what we focus on here today in our lesson. And these are those plants that produce flowers and fruits. So I would say a lot of the plants that you come across and the really pretty ones are going to be your angiosperms, all of those with the bright, colorful flowers, and the ones that produce fruit, like on our fruit trees and apple trees, those are all angiosperms. In addition to different classifications of plants, we also have different life cycles of plants. So first we have our annuals. Annuals complete their life cycle in one growing season, which usually starts in the spring and ends in the fall. So this time of year, we're going to see a lot of those pretty hanging baskets and flower pots, and a lot of the plants in there are usually going to be your annuals. They're really bright and colorful, but they usually only last for the summer. Next, we have our biennials, and biennials take 2 years to complete their life cycle. So their first year of life is spent establishing roots and stems and leaves, and the second year is when they flower, fruit, release seeds, and die. I would say biennials are a little bit less common, but there's still a lot of pretty flowers and plants that are biennials. And then lastly, we have perennials. So perennials are plants that are going to grow strong year after year. They save up their energy, go dormant, kind of like hibernation during the winter, and then they wake up in the spring. So I know every spring I look forward to seeing those daffodils and tulips grow up and flower, and those are perennials because we don't see them during the winter and for a lot of the summer, but they always come back and flower in the spring. So we have a few examples of each of our life cycles. So these are our annuals. Like I mentioned, a lot of these plants, especially here in Idaho, we're only going to see in the summer. Petunias are some that we see in a lot of those hanging baskets. They tend to branch off. They're really pretty, nice and colorful. We also have zinnias and sunflowers. Those a lot of times people will plant in their gardens just to add a little bit of color, or maybe as cut flowers to use in arrangements. And then we have begonias and marigolds, which are just some other annuals. They usually get grown in the spring and then they die towards the fall or the first frost. And then here's some examples of biennials. So hollyhock, foxglove, beets, and sweet williams. Like I said, these flowers might be a little bit less common. You might not recognize these names quite as much, but they're still really pretty. They're kind of a time investment because you do have that first year of just the vegetative growth. You're not going to see a lot of flowering. But the second year, they're really going to show their color and kind of be out in all their glory. And then lastly, we have some examples of perennials. So we have tulips, coneflower, daylily, yarrow, and lavender. So these plants, they're going to, like our tulips, they're herbaceous. So that means that they're going to come up in the spring and then they're going to die back. You're not going to see them for the rest of the year. But our lavender and yarrow and daylilies, those are going to stick around and you're going to see them, but they're only going to flower once a year, but they do come back. So today we're going to focus on annual plant life cycles because that is kind of what we're seeing right now in the summer, even though we're having unseasonably cold weather here, which isn't ideal for our plants, but we're making it work. So it starts with the seeds and then goes to vegetative growth, flowers, and death. So this is a super simple life cycle, but it's a great place to start when you're really trying to understand kind of what it goes through from seed all the way to death. So our first step is germination, and germination takes place when the plant breaks through the seed coat and begins to sprout. So in this picture, you can kind of see that the roots are starting to exit the seed, and then eventually so does the stem and the leaves. And that's just that germination process. It's usually covered by the soil. We're usually not really seeing much of that until the top part of the leaf actually exits through the soil. Our next stage of growth is vegetative growth. And this is the point in the life cycle when the plant is performing photosynthesis at a rapid rate with the goal of growing into an adult plant. So that basically just means it's getting bigger, it's getting taller, our roots are establishing, and it's kind of just growing and getting towards adult plant life. And then next up, we have flowering. And flowering is the stage where the plant puts its energy towards reproduction by producing flowers. The goal of each plant is to reproduce by producing seeds. So that's kind of what the flower or the plant is focusing on when it's flowering. And then lastly, we have plant death. So in annuals, plant death can take place due to the plant completing its life cycle and it's just done, or it can be induced by stresses such as cold temperatures. Here in Idaho, a lot of times our pretty flowers that we see and have all summer are going to die when that first frost hits because it just gets too cold for them. So that's kind of the end of their life cycle. All right, so now we're going to do a little bit of an activity where we get to watch seeds come to life. So what you're going to need for this, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can show you guys. All right, so all you need is a paper towel, a plastic bag, and some water. I'm going to use a spray bottle today, which you definitely don't have to use a spray bottle, but it just makes it easier as I'm presenting. And then you're also going to need some bean seeds. So I recommend using bean seeds. You can try this with other different types of seeds. However, I've had the most success with these just because they're big. You can see them germinating and you can actually see the process, which is super cool. So the first thing we're going to do is start by just getting our paper towel nice and damp. It doesn't need to be soaking wet, but we do want it to be able to be moist so that the seeds have contact with water. There we go. I got my paper towel all nice and wet. And then I'm just going to go ahead and put it in my plastic bag. Kind of just slide it in like that. And then I'm going to take my bean seeds and I'm going to put about 3 or 4 in there just because it's nice to have a few options of seeds. That way, maybe one doesn't germinate for some reason, the others might. I'm going to take my seeds and I'm just going to make sure that they are in contact with the paper towel and that they're towards the bottom of the bag. All right, and then once I have that all done, I'm just going to seal my bag. When this program is over and you guys are all done and headed back home or to wherever you are, you're going to want to tape this into a sunny window. It's really important that this is going to be able to get lots of sunlight and have access to sun, because that's what's going to help it germinate. So I'm going to show you guys one I did a couple weeks ago. So now that this is all ready to go. This is the seed, and as you can see, it has germinated. Let's see, it's really small, so I'm going to hope you guys can see it. But there are roots at the bottom, the seed at the top, and then the stem kind of in between. And I got to watch that happen, which was really cool. So you guys are going to get the opportunity to also watch that happen through this activity. I recommend checking on your seed a couple times a day because it happens really, really fast. You'll think there's nothing happening to your seed, and then next thing you know, it is ready to go and its roots are out and it's starting to produce a stem. So it's a super cool activity, and I'm excited to see how it works for you guys. So next thing we're going to talk about, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Maybe. But the next thing we're going to talk about is when your seed is ready to be transplanted. So the one I just showed you guys is not quite ready to be transplanted yet, just because it still hasn't extended its seeds out. Sorry, one more moment. There we go. It's not quite ready just because its leaves haven't exited quite yet. So when your plant looks like this, that's when you're going to know it is ready to be transplanted into a pot of some sort. A few tips we have for transplanting our seeds is we want to make sure that we're planting them in a pot that has lots of drainage holes so that the water can drain through, and make sure you're soaking that soil completely. That is something that's super important. We also want to use potting soil to plant our seedling instead of dirt from the outdoors. So if we just get dirt from the outside, we might be bringing in soil-borne diseases or bugs or critters that we just don't want to have in our house. So make sure you use fresh potting soil. It also helps if your potting soil has some sort of fertilizer in it. That kind of gives your plant a good base and a good starting point with lots of nutrients so that it can grow nice and strong. And then it's also super important to handle your seedling carefully as you move it. So as I just showed you, the seedling that I grew, it is really, really small. So we want to make sure we're handling it super carefully, because when they're in that germination stage, they're very delicate and it's super easy to accidentally, break it off or anything like that. And we want to make sure we carefully move it to the pot. And then also make sure to acclimate your plant to new conditions by slowly introducing them to the outdoors. So if you're planning on moving your bean plant outside, make sure you maybe put it outside a couple hours a day, bring it in at night, and then keep doing that for a week or so until you feel that your plant has acclimated to the outdoors, the different elements, and maybe the temperature change. Caring for our plants, water is something that is super, super important. So while your beans are in the bag, they're not going to need any excess water because they have that moist paper towel, and that's actually all they need. So it's pretty cool that that is all they really need to germinate. But when you move it to a pot of some sort, I definitely recommend watering your plant about once a day. You can tell your plant needs water just by putting your finger on it. If it feels damp, it's probably good to go. You don't want to overwater it because that can cause the soil to overflow from the top, and we don't want to do that. Like we mentioned in the past slide, drainage holes are really, really important in our pot. So when you move your seed from the bag to a new pot, make sure it has drainage holes. That just makes sure that the water can get all the way through your plant, soak all the soil without collecting in the bottom, because when that happens, that can sometimes cause different diseases and molding, and that's something that we like to avoid because we want our plants to be nice and healthy. All right, sunlight is also a super important aspect to our plants. Plants need light in order to perform photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is how our plants get their nutrients and their energy, and we want to make sure they're getting the sunlight so that they are able to do that. And then we also want to make sure to keep our plants in a place that gets adequate sun. So when you plant any plant, but specifically for our beans, if you go ahead and look at the back of the seed package, you're going to see different requirements, and it's either going to say full sun, maybe half sun, or shade. And if it says full sun, we want to make sure to keep our plant in the light as much as possible. For beans, it generally does need full sun. But for other plants, such as begonias, they like shade. So if you keep it in the shade, they get maybe a little bit of sunlight in the morning and then are going to stay in the shade for the rest of the day. That keeps them happy. So I definitely recommend to read any of the tags that you get on your plants or the back of the seed packets, because that is really going to help you when it comes to growing your plants and understanding kind of what it takes to make sure that they are healthy. And then nutrients. So plants need nutrients in order to be healthy. So it's recommended to use a potting soil that includes a fertilizer. This gives your plants a good base for growing, and fertilizers can also be added after planting. So if you don't have a potting soil fertilizer in it, don't stress about it. Just go ahead and go to your local store for, if you're using beans, I recommend getting a food safe fertilizer. And if you have pets, make sure that you make sure it's pet safe and all of that. It's so important to read the fertilizer label so you can understand what is required of the fertilizer and kind of what it's going to do best. So I'm going to go back to stop sharing my screen.
I have one question.
Okay, yeah.
See, just a question for clarification again on this. When you put the seed in the bag with paper towel, would you just review that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually just going to do it like this. So I'm going to show you what my completed one looks like, and then I'll switch over so you can see it from the top. So this is what it looks like. All we do is we take our plastic baggie and we put our moist paper towel inside of it. So I use the spray bottle to get it nice and wet before putting it in. If you don't have a spray bottle, that's no problem at all. You can use the sink. Just make sure that it's not soaking wet because you don't want excess water in the bottom of our bag right here. And then all I did was put my seeds in there and then make sure that they are in contact with the paper towel. And then now that that's all done, when I get done here, I'm going to find a sunny window and I'm going to get some tape and I'm going to go ahead and just tape this to the window. And I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to touch it for more than once a day, maybe to check on it. And then once it has germinated and you see the leaves have opened and the roots have established, that's when you're going to go ahead and take it out and you're able to plant it. So like the one I showed you guys, I know it's so small, so it's kind of hard to see. But this one isn't quite ready just because, as you can see, the leaves are still inside the seed part and it only has a few roots. So I would let this one stay a little bit longer before transplanting it into soil. I also wanted to show you guys kind of what a pot I would recommend for planting your seed in. I like these ones a lot because they're biodegradable. So you can actually just plant your seedling in here, let it get a little bit bigger. And then when you're ready to take it outside, you can go ahead and just plant it directly in the ground, which is super cool. Makes it really convenient for planting because then you don't have to worry about any transplanting stress or it's just easier to acclimate it to the elements. So I definitely recommend getting these. All right.